Pinfluencer, the podcast for digital product experiences.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another Pinfluencer podcast, your source for insights into the world of product information management. I'm your host today, Alexander Semro. I am the Managing Director of Content Serve US, which means working closely together with our existing customers, onboarding new clients as well, and working together with our partners across the United States. And today, I'm very excited because we're diving into a really interesting topic: boosting business-to-business B2B conversions with a robust buying experience. Joining us is Vinny Maurici, Vice President of Data Engineering at Object Edge. Vinny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. Excited to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's maybe dive into the specifics of B2B buying experience. Vinny, before we do, though, could you just share a little bit of an introduction about yourself, your role at Object Edge?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Vinny Maurici. I am head of the data business unit here at Object Edge. Object Edge, we're a systems integrator and consulting firm based in the Bay Area. I'm based in Chicago, and we support our customers through any engagements around data strategy, technology implementation around data, and really a future thinking insight on, what's next? What are people looking at investing in when it comes to data, whether that's the functional side, whether that's the technology side, or as we're looking at it now, really hitting big in 2023 on things like AI and true analytics around data and how we can support our customers.
Brilliant. Well, once again, Vinny, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start off with the B2B buying experience. How would you say it differentiates from, let's say, the more generalized customer experience that our viewers and listeners might be used to?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the first thing to do is really be empathetic to how B2B buying has always been, or what the B2B experience has been from a legacy construct, and how it's evolving in more of a modern day construct, right? If we think about B2B sales and the experience of an inventory planner or buyers or people focused on the B2B world, they would do a legacy model of, I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to find a really smart and intelligent salesperson, and that salesperson is going to educate that individual on what the best products are, what they should be buying, because we have to think about many times in the B2B world, it's not like I'm going out and buying a TV. I might be buying fasteners, or I might be buying products that go into an assembly or manufacturing line. And we're talking about fairly complicated things that need to get purchased. So there would be this model of really intelligent, industry expert focused mentality on the buying experience and process. Now, how's that evolved? Well, you've modeled a way of doing business that is, for lack of a better term, an old school way of doing it. And as demographics change, and as those buyers start getting into the millennial and Gen Z generations, they're looking for more of a true experience on trying to manage these purchases, right? So instead of picking up the phone, instead of working with salespeople, they want to go and they want to buy against a model that they're used to, whether that's an Amazon-like experience or whatever their favorite type of B2C experience is, to say, hey, I want to go on and I want to be educated on exactly what these nuanced and complicated products are in some sort of digital landscape. And for the vendor, they need to now push what was essentially tribal knowledge of their engineers or their salespeople's heads into a true digital experience. And so now I need to manage the retainment of these buyers in a way that is different from my legacy construct. I'm no longer picking up the phone. I'm now actually syndicating out data to these folks to make that purchasing decision. And that needs to be a model that's repeatable. And we need to make it so that they're happy making those decisions. And it's more complex, but at the same time, it actually is in my opinion, a massive opportunity for these organizations to really structure out their data to create an experience that is unique and tailored to whomever their end customers are going to be.
Hmm. And you mentioned, Vinny, specifically, the manufacturing and offering of complicated products. With certain manufacturers trying to adopt an Amazon-like experience, making it a little bit more easy for consumers to actually interact and potentially to transact via their own brand. Is there any strategy that you could put forth maybe to our listeners today that would be repeatable that they could start to implement and incorporate into their businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first things that we tend to recommend is
Hmm.
there's this balance of information that needs to be delivered to their customers. Because on the one hand, we know that I had mentioned the example of, buying a television, right? A
Yeah.
buyer in the B2B space is going to need more pieces of information, but we don't want to go into overload. Maybe it's not the 2, 3, 10 attributes that are associated with a product that somebody's going to buy. Maybe it's going to be 20, 30, 40, but we have to be careful because we don't want to necessarily replicate a product data sheet in some sort of buying experience, because then I'm overloaded with too much information. So step one is finding out what those critical components or those critical elements of a product is that in the B2B space are going to be critical for a purchasing decision.
The first step, I think you mentioned identifying critical elements within their processes. Would you be able to outline an example, let's say based on your experience, Vinny, where you've seen that a business has been successful in identifying that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've worked in the past with a lot of, let's focus on industrial distribution. That's probably the best example to focus on in an industry, because they were the industrial distribution sector was probably the first B2B area that truly invested in a digital feel and a digital world. So if you can imagine every warehouse and distribution center, and I think specifically, at least in the United States, we're seeing a boom in warehousing coming up. And within all of these warehouses and distribution centers, all of a sudden, there needs to be all of these things to make that warehouse and distribution center operationally active. And so when that is happening, and when you have this boom of industry occurring, you need a really, really quick and efficient way to bring in those products. So what we've done is we've taken, in a lot of these cases, you would have these big books, right? You would
Hmm.
have 1,000-page catalog that would essentially be tables of different products and SKUs, and maybe associated with it are 5 core attributes
Yeah.
within those SKUs that define it within those table-like books. And we would take that would be the starting point, and then we would enhance it, because usually that didn't have enough information. Remember, again, these big catalog print books were used to be a starting point, and then you'd pick up the phone and then you would finish your purchasing product with any questions that you would have against it. So we would then bring in the categorization structure and say, okay, within these categories in industrial distribution, let's say it's, PPE or respiratory equipment, or it could even be hand tools or ladders or anything like that. And we would say, let's define the top 20 attributes that would be associated with buying, a respiratory piece of equipment. And then we would design it around that, and we would build metadata associated with it. I think one of the components that we really stress to our customers is it's one thing to just say, hey, I need a lot of attributes and I need values to go along with it. But if you don't have proper metadata or validation rules for those attributes, all of a sudden you just get this cobbled together grouping of values that doesn't really make sense. And you have really inconsistent faceted search, you have really inconsistent experience for your customers, and it creates a really ugly experience. So when we create metadata alongside the attributes, it makes it so that normalization of that data, so that I have consistency around those values, makes it so I've got a really, really good and clean type of model. So you see organizations like Granger or MSC Industrial or McMaster-Carr with really good, clean, navigable sites where I don't need to open up their big books anymore. I can go right to their site and find exactly what I'm looking for and make that purchase, even if those purchases are, 20, 30, $100,000 at a time, because these are very large organizations with very large customer bases that buy in large quantities.
I think it also ties in a little bit to the ease of accessing data as a result and the time savings that potential buyers have by improving their journey. Yeah. And the second point you mentioned was quick, repeatable orders. I think from a B2C perspective, we can definitely see this in practice with a lot of brands, a lot of retailers. Is there any best practices here that you could share specifically with the B2B space that you've seen that have worked?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of repeatable ordering, right, you have a model where I think third-party procurement is very
Mhm,
big in this world. So whether it's using Ariba's punch out or
mhm.
Yardi or Ops Technologies, these or Coupa, these are some fairly large third-party procurement platforms. And the way it originally was designed is you would mostly have static catalogs that you would bring into these procurement platforms, which would be essentially Excel or spreadsheets that you would upload, and then I would have my contracted pricing that was associated with them, and folks would make their purchases off of digitized spreadsheets. That model created a lot of pain in terms of ease of use and repeatable ordering. Now, where people are going towards is creating a really nice punch out site. And when I say punch out, what that essentially means is it's a microsite. It's a microsite that has the same type of look and feel and experience of, let's say, a B2C type of digital commerce experience, but I get to embed all of that technology alongside the normal B2B practices of a limited set of SKUs, contracted pricing, and I can have a way that has, hey, you just ordered these within your last order. Do you want to make that a repeated process? Or, hey, this was your last order. I also recommend these multitude of complementary items along
Yes.
with it. So I'm simultaneously making it really easy to create a repeated order and upselling or bringing some actual value add to my customers all at the same time because I'm creating a really nice experience. And so you had mentioned, Alex, the efficiency of doing this. People don't want to hire armies of
Yeah.
inventory planners and buyers. They want to make it a really quick and seamless process. So this ability to create a punch out experience, it makes it so that, I'm able to do two things at once. I create a really modern approach to how I'm building out this digital commerce site for the B2B world,
Mhm,
but also embedding the ease of repeatable orders and upselling
mhm.
and cross-selling and potentially even doing replacement parting right on the website as opposed to a spreadsheet model.
Hmm. And regarding follow-ons for sale, if a B2B manufacturer can identify that a buyer has purchased one of their products, what type of tooling, what type of platforms are available for them to be able to say, potentially using predictive analytics here, but when maintenance would be required for that, when spare parts could come into play, or the warranty could be there for them? What are your experiences there?
Yeah, I mean, that's where we're getting into some really, really cool and creative new ways of building out those predictive analytics. So, for example,
Yeah.
time series modeling is huge these days, where I can essentially intersect first party customer data with
Mhm.
their actual buying patterns, and then taking the first party customer data, taking the buying patterns, and then tying that around, hey, these folks bought XYZ associated with this machine, and that machine has regular maintenance that is, every quarter or twice a year or once a year, whatever that cycle is. If I
Mhm.
have the ability to now encapsulate all of that information, I can go ahead and remind my customer base with their specific timelines of when they made purchases. So this
Mhm.
isn't like a spam email. This is actually very specific to their ordering process and to what they ordered and when they need either a replacement of it or a reminder of maintenance to right to their inbox to let them know, hey, this needs to be done. And then again, we're creating win-wins here because you're obviously
Mhm.
getting the revenue generation of those repeated orders on the vendor side, but also from the customer side, they're going to have better true on the ground maintenance and less quality issues in whatever business that they're running because they're going to be working with a vendor that is going to be actively supporting the quality of what they're doing because they're going to support their buying process. Not everybody has a really
Yeah.
good forecasting system, right? The forecasting systems that have been in place in terms of ERP buying models have been relatively the same since the late 80s. Yes, these platforms have been updated, but to create this back and forth of essentially a reminder, a helpful type of prediction of when their customers should be doing XYZ in terms of supporting their process is something amazing. Now, that takes a lot of effort, right? I need to have the initial pieces of information. I need to understand what these units are, what the maintenance cycles are. I need to have information around how the transactions were created or when the transactions were created and who the customers are. But that is part of the effort that we need to do foundationally, because once we make that effort created at a foundational level, all of the predictive analytics that we can create off of that is, I don't want to say the word easy. I think that distills it a little bit to too much of the lowest common denominator, but it is easier than if I didn't have that foundational information. And then I can do all of these skies as the limit type of modeling for my customers then.
Got it. Okay. And one of the final points that I had, Vinny, that I think would probably be of very much interest to our listeners today is the transformative power of AI. So from a PIM perspective, we can definitely talk about, the ChatGPT being integrated within a PIM system and a data management system to help accelerate certain processes that are there, definitely supporting in terms of data quality, improving the robustness, the accuracy of the quality our users are operating within the system. What are some of the opportunities you see for the future of AI specifically in B2B?
Yeah, this is obviously huge right now. And there's two ways to look at it. The first is what I consider the low-hanging fruit. I think there are things that everybody is talking about, like, oh, I can use large language models and embedding true generative AI within my technology stack, within a PIM platform, for example, to do things like, hey, build me a short description or a title for my products and for my SKUs, which is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. That's great. And that should be done. I think that's going to be one of the first things that gets embedded. But where I really am excited for is taking it beyond the simplistic and bringing it to the truly differentiated type of ways that we can leverage generative AI. For example, leveraging it for true data stewardship. When and how should I be creating a new category? When and how should I be building out metadata associated with my category design or my attribution design? How should I be modeling my attributes? You had asked a question earlier on, I don't want to replicate a product data sheet, but I still know that I need the 20 most critical attributes. Right now, that process is a very manual process where I'm essentially putting myself in the shoes of a buyer and saying, hey, I assume these are my 20 top attributes. But I should be, in an ideal world, looking at the analytics of buying patterns and what sort of click stream people are using to faceted search or to make a purchasing decision to then lead me to what I should be creating as those high up critical attributes. To leverage generative AI to see what the customer is seeing and to predict what they want to have shown in front of them is going to be huge. And again, it goes back to, I don't need an army of folks to do all of this. Now I have generative AI to help me with data stewardship, to help me with normalization, to help me with copy editing or copywriting within all of my data. It's going to be a massive opportunity that we're not talking about years to get this implemented. We're talking about months, like really, really near term, where generative AI is going to be a core component of most PIM platforms go forward.
Vinny, that's about it for timing today. It's unfortunate because we may need to have another session actually, just to go a little bit more deep dive into AI. Yeah. Number one, I wanted to thank you very much for taking the time, for joining us today, for sharing the insights that you did regarding AI, predictive analysis, and how the B2B space is transforming. I really appreciate that. Vinny, could you just tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you and your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Vinny Maurici at Object Edge. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on any social, and more than happy to talk and reach out and explore some of these opportunities in data.
Brilliant. To all of our listeners, thank you very much for taking the time for joining us today on another episode of the Pimfluencer podcast. Stay in touch and stay tuned for more insights into the world of product information management and data management. And until next time, thank you so much for joining us.
This was Pimfluencer, the podcast for digital product experiences. More information can be found on www.contentserve.com.